gods are good, we do believe. They love us and they guide us, and when we're wrong they chide us, and if we're real good and do what we're told, we won't have to come back to this miserable world.
Hi, I'm Lucian Buscemi, and that over there is the alien comic. He used to be part of this thing called the Full Moon Show, but that was a long time ago, back in the 80s in the East Village. So, who might you ask is the alien comic? Let's find out. The alien comic is my buddy Tom Murren. He still lives in the East Village on Ridge Street. I decided to visit him and get to the bottom of what he and the notorious Full Moon shows were all about. So how did the whole Full Moon show get started?
Okay, this is great. I love to tell this story. It was 1975, and one night we went outside on a full moon, and we just started jumping around and doing our dances and just acting silly. It was really a lot of fun. And then during that evening, Luna Macaroona, the moon goddess, came down and she said,
"If you remember me on the night of every full moon from now on out, I'll take care of you for the rest of the month."
And so every time full moon fell on that night, we would do a full moon show at PS 122. This was in the early 80s when all that performance scene was going on. And so there'd be your mom, Joe Andres, and she would do an act. Dance Noise, they would do an act. Mimi Gazy, she would do an act, and I would do an act and kind of MC the show. We were the Full Moon crew.
I'm very happy to present appearing tonight with Joe Andres.
Joe Andres would do dance performances, but there would also be a lot of visual things that would go on. And she always liked to have the room really, really dark, because she would have slides which would be projected through different colored materials. So it was always kind of like a magic movie, more like Fantasia than almost anything else. Plus, there would be a dance going on at the same time, and no one else ever has really duplicated the kind of shows that Joe was doing, which were a combination of dance and light and music, and there would be filmed and slides. It was one of a kind.
Our next act, one of my favorite acts, a true trailblazer of the possibilities of performance, Mimi Gazy.
I'd rather have a paper doll to call my own than have a fickle, bright and real live girl.
Another act was Mimi Gazy, and her acts were always quite interesting because they would be very scary. Have you ever seen any of Mimi's acts?
I'd like to tell you something. You bore me!
No one could quite knew whether or not Mimi was kidding. They wanted her to be kidding, but they weren't quite sure. She had a real demeanor about her where you weren't quite sure that she might do something next that would be really frightening or scary.
They can be lovely. They can be raucous. They can be terrifying. The premier practitioners of synchronized aggression. Iobst, Lucy, Sexton, dance song.
Dance Noise always had to be the last act. Dance Noise was Lucy. This is Lucy here, and this is Annie. And they danced and they made noise. Whatever was going on at the time, they would make these political commentaries. And then almost always they would end, and up above the ceiling would be this huge, like one of those big plastic bags, completely filled with fake blood, and that thing would just pour down on them, and the two of them would just be standing there completely covered in fake blood, and that would almost always be the end of the show. we were all part of the Full Moon crew. But then we'd have guests. Ethel Eichelberger was a very tall, statuesque performer.
I married my own son who has murdered his own father. But our marriage is good and we have 4 lovely kids. You wouldn't blow.
He was absolutely captivating. You'd watch him perform and you just couldn't take your eyes off him because he was just so real and so talented and gave everything out to the audience. Steve and Mark would come and perform. Steve and Mark did a little scene called The Lunch Breakers.
Horace,
how you doing? One guy said, hey, I got a little joint. Want to smoke a joint? Yeah, okay, sure. And then smoked a little joint. They didn't really, but that was the idea. And all of a sudden, they started breakdancing. It was really kind of a perfect little 10-minute skit. That was one of their many, many good skits that they used to do around.
Come on, Walter, let's go. We're late. Fun's over. I think we're almost ready, so let's have a little cheer. Give me an L. Give me a U. Give me an N. Give me an A.
And since then, it's been my religion, in that I have done a show to Luna Macaroona every full moon. Since then, no matter where I have, I've done them in front of the ferry boat in Hong Kong. I've done them in Calcutta. Wherever the full moon is, we'd always celebrate the full moon and the idea of Luna Macaroona looking over all of us. And that was the tradition of the full moon shows, and we were all part of the full moon crew.
Things have got to be better somewhere else. Oh, we do believe. The gods are good, we do believe. They love us and they guide us, and when we're wrong, they chide us, and if we're real good and do what we're told, we won't have to come back to this miserable world.